All right, hi everyone. Welcome to Dinosaur Journey After Hours. My name is Stephanie Lukowski. I am the Curator of Education for the Museums of Western Colorado, and I'm really excited to celebrate National Fossil Day and Earth Science Week with all of you. So we're going to be, instead of showing you some of the amazing dinosaurs that you think of at Dinosaur Journey, we're going to show you some of the little more unusual, maybe unexpected things that we have here. So while we're doing this presentation, I'd ask that you all keep your web cameras off, your volume muted, and any questions you have, just put in the chat feature and we'll answer them after we're done. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to our Curator of Paleontology, Dr. Julia McHugh, and she's going to show you some of the unique things we have here, and I'll hop on a little later and talk to you about my expertise, which is Ice Age mammals, so you have that to look forward to as well. So this is going to be a fun night, and thank you all for coming. And with that, handing it off.
Hi, everybody. I'm Curator of Paleontology, Dr. Julie McHugh, and welcome to Behind the Scenes at Dinosaur Journey. Dinosaur Journey, because it's got dinosaurs in the name, and you might have noticed there's dinosaur bones behind me. That's pretty much what people think of, but we actually have a pretty large collection. Now, we do have lots of dinosaur bones in our collection, but our collection actually expands further than that. So we have rocks and minerals in our collections. We've got other animals, other vertebrate animals, so things like crocodiles and turtles and weird mammals, and we'll show you some of those here in a minute. But we also have invertebrate animals, so animals that don't have a backbone. So we make things like shellfish, clams, and ammonites, and flies and insects. And so I'm going to show you not everything. We don't have time for everything. We have over 14. But hopefully we'll do this a little bit more regularly as we continue to work our way through our global pandemic. We're hope to bring you more behind the scenes at Dinosaur Journey. So today we're just going to wet your whistle with some of the more unusual things in our collections. So I mentioned dinosaur bones. Now, dinosaur bones are definitely what we have the most of on display in our exhibit hall. They take up the most space in my collections, but we have other things that you might not necessarily think of when you think of dinosaurs. We have fossils called gastroliths in our collection. So what's a gastrolith? Well, the name gastrolith literally means stomach stone. And here I have a tray of them with me. And these are polished stones that are often found in areas where we get large herbivorous dinosaurs called sauropods. All these bones right here behind me on these shelves here at the bottom, those are all bones of sauropods. These are large, gigantic plant eaters of the Jurassic period, but they had pretty crappy teeth. They didn't have really advanced chewing mechanisms like we see in other dinosaurs, like duck-billed dinosaurs, so they couldn't really chew and grind up teeth in their mouths. So instead, they would use their teeth like a rake through the vegetation, through the tree limbs, through the plants, and pull all of the leaves down into their gizzard. They had a gizzard like modern-day birds, and inside those gizzards were stones that they would swallow from nearby rivers. And we find these near dinosaur skeletons. They're typically types of rocks that are not found anywhere in that area. So they're really out of place. They're not where they're supposed to be. And they're polished, like you can see here. And sometimes they have a little bit of etching on them from intestinal acids from digesting plants. And what these things do are they bob around in the gizzard and they help to grind up the plants that the dinosaurs are eating. So we have a few of these in our collection, and even though they're not dinosaur bones, they do kind of fit with our dinosaur fossils. But enough about dinosaurs. Let's look at some other stuff. So dinosaurs are closely related to other reptiles, particularly animals like crocodiles. Well, we get crocodiles here in Western Colorado. We get everything from small crocodiles, like Fruitachampsa that was running around, maybe being this long, to big alligatoroids like Deinosuchus, and even medium-sized crocodiles. So I'm going to show you a crocodile fossil that was recently brought into the museum. Somebody found it and brought it into the museum. And This crocodile was found up near Douglas Pass. It was found in a stream bed, so we're not exactly sure where it came from. But here you can see all of the bony armor of the back of the crocodile. So this is the main ridge where the spine would be, and then you've got bony armor going over the spine, going along the sides, just like we see in a living crocodile. And then if we flip her over, there are the vertebrae, there are the ribs. So we're working with the Bureau of Land Management, who manages the land up at Douglas Pass, to see if we can't relocate where this animal came from and maybe find more of it. Now, we don't have the skull, we don't have any of the limbs of the animal, so we're not really sure which crocodile it is. This animal would have been from the Eocene epoch, so about 35 to 50 million years ago. So pretty old, older than anybody watching this video. So we're still looking for the rest of this fossil, and hopefully we'll be able to identify which Eocene crocodile it is. But Douglas Pass is known for lots of things. Douglas Pass is known for its insect fossils, right? But some of you guys have been up to Douglas Pass to collect insects, and we find plant leaves, we find twigs, and we also find lots and lots of bugs. Insects typically don't fossilize well, so you need really special conditions to get them to fossilize without destroying them. Their bodies are pretty fragile. And here we have a slab of a bunch of pieces of insects, along with pieces of leaves and other things. And you'll notice that these pieces of insects are kind of blobby, they're ovoid shaped, and some of them even look like they have stripes on them. These are insect larvae, so they're not even a full metamorphosed insect. They are the baby insects that just hatched from their eggs. So these are insect larvae. This would have been a pretty gross spot to be back in the Eocene. All those maggots, ew. But we get fully formed insects as well. Here we have a beetle from up near Douglas Pass. Let me hold this up here for you guys. You guys can see it. You've got the wings. So beetles are unique among insects that they have two sets of wings. They have an outer wing and an inner wing. Think of a ladybug. Ladybugs are beetles. And so they open their outer wings to let their inner wings out, and that's what they typically fly with. The outer set of wings are more like a cover. But we get beetles, we get flies, we get cockroaches. So here is a cockroach. You can still see its antennae and a little bit of its wings in there. So yeah, Douglas Pass was a bug extravaganza. Now, because Douglas Pass is owned by the BLM, and bird fossils are okay to collect. If you go up to Douglas Pass, you're allowed to collect plant leaves and insect leaves, or insect leaves, haha, insect fossils, and take them home. You can't resell them. You can't take too many, so just a few. It's called casual collection, but it is okay to collect a few insect fossils and a few plant fossils up at Douglas Pass. If you find any vertebrate animals like that crocodile I just showed you, those have to be turned in to the museum or to the BLM office. But we get other Eocene aged animals around in Western North America. So I'm going to show you a couple fossils from the White River Formation, which is a little bit northeast of us in Nebraska. And let's see if you guys can guess what this one is. Got a guess? How many of you said turtles? Raise your hand even though I can't see you. It is a turtle. This is a fossil turtle that's about 35 million years old. You can see part of the shell is sort of weathered away, but you can see underneath where the shell was, the little ridges where the ribs would have been. So turtle shell is actually pretty common in the fossil record. We have lots of turtle shell at the Museums of Western Colorado in Dinosaur Journey. We have them from the Eocene, from the Paleocene, even from the Jurassic period. We get a lot of turtle shell in the Cretaceous period. So turtle shell is pretty common, but finding a whole turtle is not. That is actually pretty rare. And finding the bones of a turtle, so the skull, the neck, the limbs, is even more rare. But turtle shell seems to be a pretty common type of fossil that we get in Western North America. But we also get fossil mammals. So we're still in the Eocene. And in the Museums of Western Colorado, we have quite a few of this type of fossil mammal. Now, the snout is a little broken right here, but you can see the eyeball, which is right here. Here is the cheekbone, that zygomatic arch. You can see the full tooth row, and you got the nice lower jaw here. You can even see the canines and the incisors. Less pretty on this side. This animal is an animal called an Oreodont. These are small omnivorous mammals from the Oligocene and the Eocene epochs, and we're not really sure what they're related to today. They're related to the hoofed mammals, but their exact lineage is still being worked out. You can see this large opening in front of the eye. Don't be alarmed. You have one underneath each of your eye. That's an opening for nerves and blood vessels to come and feed your face. Very important. We also get invertebrate animals in the area. We have lots of invertebrates in our collection. I already showed you some bugs. We get shellfish as well. So if you've been fossil collecting up in the Book Cliffs, you know you can find ammonites. But did you know there's other types of shellfish fossils in the Book Cliffs? So I'm cheating here. This one's from near Pueblo, from the Pierre shell, which is very similar to the Maine Coast shell, which makes up the Book Cliffs. And you can see these big clams. We get those in the Book Cliffs. You get these straight-shelled squids called baculites. They're related to those coiled squids, those ammonites that are really common and a high prize among fossil collectors. But you do get straight squids in the Cretaceous interior seaways of Western North America. And sometimes they look like this, where they're pretty worn away. You can sort of see their outlines. You can see parts of the inner part of the shell where the sutures were. But sometimes they still have their outer shell, and that outer shell hasn't been deformed. And those are super gorgeous. And we have a lot of these in our collections. These were donated by a couple of fossil collectors by the name of Carl Hirsch and Ivan Klatter. And these are baculites that still have their original shell. The original shell is made out of a mineral called aragonite. Aragonite is a very shiny substance. As you can see, it's fairly iridescent. This is what creates mother of pearl. If you've ever bought a shirt that had buttons made out of mother of pearl, this is the same substance. In clams, it's the substance that will wrap itself around a grain and create an actual pearl. So we have lots of these in our collections. These are less common to find with the original aragonite on them. Here's another piece. But you can see it's just a straight shell. So these animals are related to the chambered nautilus. They're related to octopi and squids. And so the animal, when it was alive, would be at the wide end. So it would be down here, and it would hang out this way with its tentacles, and it would through the water. And these were really common in the western interior seaways of North America and were a favorite food of big marine reptiles like mosasaurs and plesiosaurs. Now, I'm going to show you a few more fossils. These are going to be in the cabinets here. And I'm going to show you a fossil that was recently returned to the museum. It was actually excavated from private land by an amateur collector back in the 1990s. It was phoned into the museum at the time with a completely incorrect description. It was called the dinosaur from the slopes of the Grand Mesa. Well, the curator of paleontology at the time, Dr. Harley Armstrong, knew what rocks were on Grand Mesa, and they're not the right age of rocks to preserve dinosaurs. So he really didn't take it seriously. He thought somebody had just found something weird on the ground. Well, the guy collected it, and it was a family heirloom for a while, and then it was given to the BLM. It was given to Greg McDonald while he was still up in Salt Lake. Greg McDonald, knew it was from private land, so it wasn't really his thing with the BLM. So he took it over to the Utah Geological Survey, to the office of Dr. Jim Kirkland, who is a paleontologist. Well, Dr. Jim Kirkland happened to have been in Harley's office when that phone call came in, and he knew exactly what the animal was. It's like, oh, that's the dinosaur from Grand Mesa. And he knew that that animal needed to come back to Western Colorado. It didn't belong in Utah. It belonged in the Grand Junction area at the Museums of Western Colorado. So a couple of years ago, Jim Kirkland and I met up in the town of Green River and did the transfer. And now it's been fully prepared and is available for study in our collections. So our collections are where we store fossils when they're not on display. It's also where we make fossils available for scientific research. We have visiting researchers come to our collections from all over the world and to study our fossils and create new scientific hypotheses based on the fossils in our collection. So this animal is an animal called Oxyena. It would have been the largest predator of its day, and it lived in the Paleocene and Eocene epochs, so right around 50 million years ago. So here I'm going to show you the good stuff, of course. Here we have the skull and the lower jaw. So this animal has a skull about the size of a modern day mountain lion. So this was a pretty big animal. It is a mammal. You can see this piece right here. That's part of the cheekbone. That's part of that zygomatic arch. You can see it's got teeth. It's got big, sharp canines. And this would have been the top mammalian predator of its day. Now, it wasn't the only predator on the landscape. There were smaller mammalian predators, and there were also crocodiles living in Colorado then. And some of those crocodiles lived in water, like modern day alligators and crocodiles. And some of those crocodiles had hoofs like a horse and ran around on land. So it was a very bizarre time, a very experimental time after the extinction of the non-bird dinosaurs. And so we get wonderful and weird creatures like this Oxyena. But we have more than the skull. We have almost the whole animal. We have parts of the limbs. We have parts of the vertebral column. We've got oodles of ribs, oodles and oodles of ribs, part of the shoulder, and part of the neck. So are the very first two vertebrae in the neck of Oxyena. So this is the axis, or sorry, this is the atlas, this is the axis. And you can see this really round protuberance. This is only found in mammals, and it creates that sort of ball and socket joint that lets your head just twist and move around. So this is something unique to mammals, and it's only found on the atlas, the very first vertebra of the vertebral column. So the very first vertebra in the neck. So that's pretty cool. But it wasn't the biggest mammal. It was the biggest mammalian predator. We have other mammals that are larger. The prey species, if you will. Animals like this wonderful weirdo, and this is the lower jaw here. This is an animal called Coryphodon. This is the lower jaw, one of the lower jaws of Coryphodon. You can see it's got really big tusks and really kind of rhino-shaped teeth. This thing would have been a cross between a rhinoceros, a hippo, and a dachshund. It had really, really short, stubby limbs. So this animal lived in waterways, on the floodplains, and in the rivers. Colorado was much more humid, much more warm back when this thing was alive, and this was one of the largest mammalian herbivores of its time. Now, I mentioned it had stubby legs. So that jaw, just half of the jaw, required me to hold it with two hands, right? Well, this is the humerus. I found this humerus. Sorry, I couldn't resist. It's the upper arm bone. You have too, I hope. And you can see that it's about the same size as my humerus. It's not all that much bigger. So an animal that has a 2-foot long skull has an arm that's about the size of my arm. So this thing would have been very squat, very round barrel chest with weird tusks. Yeah, it would have been a fairly unfortunate looking animal. But it was sharing those waterways with crocodiles. We do get crocodiles from the same layers that we get those big Coryphodon. And here we have part of the skull of a crocodile. So this is the back of the skull. Okay, you can see those two openings for jaw muscles. It's got little horns on it, pretty cool. And we've got the middle part, and then I'm going to show you, we've got the tip of the snout. So this was a narrow-snouted crocodilian, but it had really blunt teeth. Look at these teeth. These teeth are made for cracking turtle shell. So even though it was living in the waterways with big animals like Coryphodon, its jaws were meant to crush turtle shell, catch fish, and other small animals in those waterways. Now, speaking of water, I'm going to show you a water-dwelling animal from far away. Some of the fossils in our collection, the museum collected ourselves, and some of them were donated by other collectors. And I'm going to show you a couple of those right now. Let's see if you can guess what it is. These are the teeth of a shark called Carcharachilles Megalodon. You probably just know it as the Meg or Megalodon. All right, and their teeth come in different sizes. The largest ones are definitely the most showy, but you can even see on the smaller one these little serrations that run up and down the tooth surface. So these guys were bladed like steak knives and pretty much had their pick of what was going on in the ocean. They were related to modern day lamid sharks, and they were definitely not an animal you wanted to go swimming with. The more that I learn about the fossil record, the more I realize whenever I get my time machine, I'm never going swimming. Never, 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 never. Now, Megalodon is extinct. It went extinct in the Pleistocene epoch. You might recall that the Pleistocene epoch was an epoch that was punctuated with ice ages. And in those ice ages were more mammals, ice age mammals. And who better to tell you about ice age mammals than our resident ice age mammal expert, Ms. Stephanie Lukowski. So I'm going to hand it over to her.
All right. So a lot of the time that periods that and the fossils that Julia was talking about, Dr. McHugh was talking about, the Earth was a lot warmer. So in the Paleocene and Eocene, the world was a lot hotter. In the Cretaceous, the world was a lot hotter. So I'm going to talk to you about things that are around when it's a little colder. And I think, you know, this isn't a surprise. We're in Colorado. We have the ski industry. You know, we're known for our snow. But you might not expect to find ice age mammals or animals in general in a dinosaur museum. But we happen to have some, and they're really neat. So when we talk about the ice age, we're generally talking about the most recent set of glaciations and interglacials. In fact, technically we're still considered to be in that ice age, because in order to be an ice age, you have to have ice year-round at the poles or at high mountain glaciers, and that we still have. But there's actually been evidence of at least 5 ice ages in the Earth's history. But I'm not going to focus on the other ones. I'm just going to focus on the most recent ice age. So during the ice age, we have interglacial phases like we do now, where the weather's a little warmer and similar today, but we also have glacial stages where everything gets colder, and that's when those massive continental glaciers that you might think of, you know, miles high and thick, covering the continent would appear. So they'd advance and retreat, advance and retreat. Now, not a lot of animals live on top of glaciers or in ice areas. It's just hard to find prey and things. So the animals that I'm going to show you were living in these areas during those interglacial stages. And some interglacial stages were cooler than today, but some were even warmer and wetter than today. So it just depends on the stage. But we find giant mammals. So dinosaurs aren't the only giant thing we find here in Colorado. We find huge mammals. And so the most iconic, I think the thing that people think about the most are your mammoths and the mastodons. These are both distant cousins to the elephants. Mammoths are a little more closely related to elephants than mastodons are. And I think it's really fun to think about multiple species of these giant elephants roaming around the landscape. But you wouldn't have necessarily seen them at the same place at the same time. And I'm going to show you why. So this right here is one tooth. This is actually a replica because the real tooth I have is really heavy and very delicate, and I don't want to drop it or be responsible for it falling apart, but this is a very good replica. This is one tooth of a Columbian mammoth. So there are actually 9 species of mammoth, and Columbian mammoths are the largest. A lot of people think about the woolly mammoth. The woolly mammoth is about the same size as the Asian elephant today, and we know that it has that shaggy, furry coat to keep it nice and warm. They tended to live closer to where the glaciers were. The Columbian mammoth is actually named for Christopher Columbus because it's a New World mammoth. We don't find them in Colombia, mostly in North America, actually totally in North America. They extended as far south as Mexico and pretty far north, but unlike their woolly mammoth cousins that you can find in Siberia and Europe and in North America, they just stuck around here. Now this is what we call the occlusal surface or the biting surface, and you might think it kind of looks like the bottom of a gym shoe a little bit. You also might be astounded that it's one giant tooth. So mammoth teeth are built for eating a lot of grasses. So you can kind of think of this surface like a cheese grater, just grinding up all those different types of grasses. And the tooth is large, but they'd only have around 4 molars, one on each side, top and bottom, in their mouth at any given time. And like modern elephants, their teeth would come in a kind of unique way. So as one tooth was being worn down, the new tooth would come in behind like a conveyor belt and push it forward. And it would break along these enamel ridges. So why do they have such giant teeth? Well, if you have a giant head, you need giant teeth to fill your mouth. So that's the case for these. And they got 6 sets of teeth throughout their lifetime. So when they were babies, they start off with smaller version of these teeth and they get larger and larger and larger. And the last tooth would come in around the time they were 45 years old. We think mammoths could probably have lived around 60, 65 years of age before their teeth completely wore out and they would be able to eat very well. So that's the mammoth. You can think of them as graceful, tall. They have those typical curved tusks that you see often in the movies and in images. So that's the charismatic proboscidean of the time. But perhaps a little less charismatic, but I also think is incredibly interesting, is the mastodon. And this is a real mastodon tooth from our collections. So you can see it has all these cusps. And when I have kids come in, I like to ask them, so what do you think mastodons ate? And a lot of times they'll tell me meat, but that's not the case at all. These cusps are actually incredibly good for grinding up the type of plant material you'd find in the forest. So they're eating woody materials, pine leaves, nuts, barks, all that kind of thing. And so these cusps, in conjunction with the bottom tooth, would act like a mortar and pestle to grind up all that material. Now, mastodons, they were stockier. Whereas the Columbian mammoth could get up to 13 feet tall at the shoulder, mastodons were maybe around 10 feet tall at the shoulder. And you can think of them as like the bulldog of the elephant world. Stockier, stronger, straighter tusks. They even had a set of tusks not only on the top, but sometimes on the bottom coming from their chin. And we call those mandibular tusks. And so some of them had them, some didn't. As time went on, those mandibular tusks became less common, but that is one feature that they have that the mammoths did not. Now you might notice that this tooth is a little smaller, and that's because unlike the mammoths that just had 4 molar teeth, they would have 8 molar teeth. So they'd have 2 on each side, plus their tusks. So they pretty much double everything that the mammoths had. And you know, these were really kind of ornery animals too. I would not want to run across one of them in the forest because they were known to fight each other over territory. We find lots of evidence of mastodons with broken ribs or other injuries that have healed, and the only animal that could really have given them that injury would be another mastodon. So kind of unique animals. One kind of cool fact about mastodons is that Colorado is home to the largest site of mastodons in the world. So up in Snowmass Village, there was a site called the Ziegler Reservoir Fossil Site, and that's only about 2 hours of drive from here in Grand Junction, or in Fruita, I should say, is where we're at right now, 2 hours from Grand Junction, where they found 36,000 bones, tusks, and teeth from 56 different species of Ice Age animals. An incredibly unique find, and it was the highest concentration of mastodons. They also did find 4 Columbian mammoths, but that was as the climate was changing. So it was a lake environment that existed for quite some time. So over time, the climate changed there, and that fossil find recorded the evidence. Unfortunately, here in the Grand Valley, we don't have these spectacular glacial lakes or remnants of them here. We find a lot of our fossils through glacial outwash. So as those alpine glaciers melted, the rivers that came flowing with the meltwater is usually what carries our Ice Age fossils. And so they tend to be a little more beat up and a little less pristine. So you get segments of things. And so I want to show you something else. Mammoth tusk. It's just a part. It's broken up. It's kind of common. But tusks are really cool. So they're actually teeth. They're actually incisor teeth, so like our front teeth, that are kind of modified, and they're built, if you can see, like an onion with all sorts of different layers. And these layers, just like tree rings, record the animal's life. So we can tell a lot from tusks. Tusks are really cool. They can tell us what season the animal died in. They can tell us if it's a female, whether or not she's given birth and when and how old she was. They can record periods of drought or hardship that the animal may have faced. So I think that tusks are really, really interesting and neat to find. And even though you only have a section, you can still get some good information. This is an incredibly heavy section, mind you, but a lot of great information can come from them. And so we have a couple tusk fragments, but I grabbed the smaller one because, like I said, very heavy. Not everything in the Ice Age was huge. So, we think a lot about giant animals, but we also have smaller things. And when you study fossil mammals, you study a lot about teeth. Teeth in mammals are really great because we have not only different teeth from front to back, which we call heterodont dentition, but our molars are pretty unique, and they can help us figure out what species we have. So, I'm going to show you another tooth. So this is a tooth of a horse. And horses, you find them in North America, but one of the neat things is that horses originated in North America, but they also went extinct at the end of the last kind of glaciation cycle, and they were brought back to North America from the Europeans. So they originated here, they migrated and radiated and evolved, and then they came back. So I think that's a really, really neat thing. In fact, there's another animal, I don't have a tooth from it, but camels, believe it or not, like horses, are from North America. And like horses, they radiated, they moved. When they lived here, they weren't the desert animals we think of today. They were kind of mixed browser grazers that didn't really live in desert environments. But when they moved to the Middle East and North Africa, that area, that's when they adapted for that desert lifestyle. So we have evidence in Colorado of camelops, which is a camel that's about 20% larger than modern camels. And that was kind of surprising to find at that Ice Age site in Snowmass for some people. But for those of us who know, camels originated here. This is their home turf, so to speak. But they adapted so much for the desert that bringing them back here in North America doesn't really make sense. So that's the Ice Age in Colorado in a nutshell, from what we have in our collections. And so I'd like to thank you all for coming and listening to the talk. And I'm going to look in the chat and see what kind of questions we have and answer them. All right, so Joe wants to know, and Julia, you might want to answer this. Is Douglas Pass a fossil hotbed here in Colorado? I had never heard of it until now. So I'm going to just turn this over so she can answer that.
Douglas Pass is a great place to find invertebrate fossils. It's not really a great place to find things like dinosaurs or anything else. I showed you that crocodile. That is extremely rare. We almost never find vertebrate fossils up there, but it is a great place to find fossil plant leaves, to find stromatolites, and to find fossil insects. I suppose I could have done that.
All right. We have another question coming through. So we have plenty of time. So if you have some questions, please do write them in the chat and we'll get to them.
Who wants to see Stephanie talk about a dinosaur?
Dinosaurs are definitely not my thing. I love working here. I think they're wonderful, but fossil mammals have been what I studied in my paleontology career. So I'll gladly answer those questions. Yeah, it looks like we're getting a question coming in, so just waiting for it to come through.
Well, and if you have questions about the museum or collections or how paleontology works, you can also send those to us too. You've got 2 paleontologists on retainer right now, so ask any question that's been burning in your psyche.
Yeah, you can find both Julia and my information on our website, so feel free if you have any questions to ask us after this is closed. But I see several people are typing, so don't worry, I'm not going to head out just yet. Oh, Jacqueline, thank you so much. She says you're both awesome presenters, very entertaining and educational. Thank you for this unique experience. Please do a part 2. We would love to. So as the Curator of Education, I have a little bit of say over that. So I'll try to make that happen. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. And Luca wants to know how you became a paleontologist. So I'll start and then I'll hand it over to Julia because we're both paleontologists doing slightly different things. So when I was a kid, I grew up in the Chicago area, and we have a great museum there called the Field Museum. And I fell in love with it. Like, I dragged my parents, and they're listening to this, so I'm sure they could tell you, to the museum all the time. And I actually loved the dinosaurs back then. They're still great, you know. And so I decided at a young age that I wanted to become a paleontologist. So I went to school. I went to Tulane in New Orleans and got a geology degree. So that was 4 years of studying, and I learned about geology. So it's really important to study geology if you're going to be a paleontologist, because where do you usually find fossils? In the rocks. So knowing how those rocks were formed and what environments they represent, how to figure out how old they are, all of that's really important. And then I went to school for 2 additional years to get a master's degree in vertebrate paleontology from the South Dakota School of Mines and Technology. So 2 more years, I studied mammals from the Paleocene, so a lot of what Julia was talking about. And then I also have a master's degree in natural science education that I completed recently. So I love teaching people about fossils. I think it's fun. If you sit next to me on the bus, I'll probably babble to you about fossils. Like, it's just what I love to do. So I love to share that excitement. So for me, this job here in the museum is the best ever. So I get to teach people about fossils. I get to be around fossils all the time, and I get to be around people like Julia, who is doing amazing, fascinating research. So there's many different ways to become a paleontologist. And so Julia is going to tell you about the way she did. So I'm going to just turn this around so you can see her.
So I grew up not far from where Stephanie grew up. I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. So every now and then, if I start talking fast, you'll hear the drawl from Louisville, Kentucky, right on the Ohio River. And in the creek beds along the Ohio River, they are just basically pavements of coral reefs from the Paleozoic era. So from the Devonian period, from the Silurian period, from the Ordovician period. And so I grew up wandering around on creek beds, stuffing my pockets with brachiopods and horn corals and pretty rocks and stuff. I've always loved rocks. I have loved rocks. My mom has a picture of me when I was about 18 months old in my Sunday finest little cute outfit, hanging out in the rocks, and I had one in each hand, and it was just downhill from there. And when I was in 8th grade, I got interested in fossils. That was when I had my first earth science course, and I started learning about the history of life. And I was finding lots of fossil coral and fossil shellfish, and so it kind of got the bug in me. And so then I went to college. I ended up studying in geology because gotta like rocks, and I love rocks. And I also took a lot of courses in biology. So to be a paleontologist, you really need a double helping of science. You need to know about geology, you need to know about biology, you need to know anatomy, ecology, evolution, all those good things. And you need a little smattering of math. You gotta know some math and some physics and some chemistry and all that good stuff. So I got my degree from Hanover College, which is in southern Indiana. And then I went off to my master's program at Idaho State University, which is not far from where Fruta is right here. And there I was working on fossil mammals. So it's weird to think that far back and that I once studied fossil mammals. I was working in the Eocene on a biostratigraphy project, so studying the rocks and putting the rocks in order using fossils. And I was looking at small rodents and rabbit teeth and stuff like that. Rated many anthills for fossils. The ongoing joke for my master's thesis was powered by millions of tiny ants because they pick up fossils to build their little ant nests. But then I went on and I did a few other things. I took a break between my master's and my PhD. I did everything that you can think of. I was even in training to be a financial advisor for a couple of months. And I realized that I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy doing anything that wasn't fossils. I needed to go back and do fossils. So I went to graduate school at the University of Iowa, and I did my PhD on mass extinctions. And what is the mother of all mass extinctions? The Permo-Triassic mass extinctions that set the stage for the age of dinosaurs. So I was working with amphibian fossils because they're a really good indicator of ecological stress. Think about it. If you have any sort of fluctuation in chemistry of your pond, your amphibians are going to die first. Your salamanders, your frogs, they're really sensitive to any sort of changes in their environment. So I was using them to kind of test what was going on in the mass extinction. And I ended up leaving there. I finished, got my PhD a few years ago. I spent a few years working at a medical school. Medical schools are hiring lots of paleontologists to teach anatomy to their medical students. And then I got the opportunity to come here in Western Colorado. And it's kind of funny because I always swore, oh, I'm never going to work on dinosaurs. And here I am, and I'm working on dinosaurs. And sooner or later, everybody works on dinosaurs. But it's been a lot of fun. I'm kind of working on the best dinosaurs, the Jurassic dinosaurs, the giants of all dinosaurs, things that are bigger than T-Rex, way bigger than T-Rex. And it's been a lot of fun. So it's been kind of a bouncy ride around, and it's been great. I've been doing some research lately on how dinosaur carcasses decompose. I dinosaurs and grossness, and I put them together and popped out research. So what is my favorite dinosaur from Luca? My favorite dinosaur is an animal called Apatosaurus. So you might know Apatosaurus as Littlefoot from The Land Before Time. And I have no reason than to offer that it was my favorite as a kid, and it's still my favorite now. Stephanie, do you have a favorite dinosaur?
So I also have a favorite dinosaur. I'm tied between two. So I think Brachiosaurus is really cool, super tall. When I was at the Field Museum as a volunteer, I would always see the Brachiosaurus, that giant long-necked dinosaur. First it was inside the museum, and then they moved it. They made a cast of it that was weatherproof, and they moved it outside. And it's actually from here in the Grand Valley area. So I think that's incredibly cool. I think that sauropods are really neat. I'm also a little partial to Ceratosaurus, which is the official fossil of Fruta. It's a theropod dinosaur. Has 4 fingers on its hands. It's got horns above its eyes and above its nose. Osteoderms, so along its back, giving it a lizard-like appearance. And for its size, which it isn't quite as big as Allosaurus, it has massively huge teeth. So I think that's really neat. We don't know exactly why it has such big teeth, and I like that kind of mystery. So we have another question. Oh, there's a couple more, so let me get to these in order. So Mary Anning is an inspiration to me, and you two ladies are her modern equivalent. So good. Oh, thank you so much, Jacqueline. That's really sweet. So Joe has a question. When you are talking about turning in fossil specimens to the BLM, is there a minimum type of fossil that has to go to them? Is it the law that it has to go to the BLM or museum, or is that statewide? Do you want to take that one?
Sure.
Since you are
So at Douglas Pass, you have to, because at Douglas Pass, the land is managed by the BLM. That's why it goes to the BLM. So in the United States, it all depends on who the landowner is, right? So if you're bushwhacking through somebody's field and you find a dinosaur, well, it belongs to whoever owns that land, right? So it belongs to the landowner if it's private land. If you're on state land, that does vary depending on which state you're in. Here in Colorado, fossils are protected on state land. So you would go to the state ranger or state park ranger and say, hey, I found this. You want to leave it where it is. That's the most important thing, because we get a lot of our information about fossils from context, from what rock layer it's in, how it's oriented, if there's anything next to it, what the sedimentology is. So we always want people to leave it where it is. Take a picture on your phone, drop a GPS pin, go see the ranger, go to the BLM office. If it's in a national park, of course, everything's protected in the national park. Same with the national conservation area. You can't pick a flower in a national conservation area or a national park. So leave it where it is. Go find a ranger. Go find the visitor center. Go find the office. Let them know. Vertebrate fossils from animals like us that have an internal bony skeleton are protected by federal law on all public land. So those are never okay to collect. That even includes footprints. But depending on where you are, invertebrates like insects and shellfish might be okay. So on normal BLM land that's not specially managed, like a national conservation area or a special research area, those are okay to collect for, just casual collection. We don't want you opening up a mine or anything like that. You can also, if you take a picture, get a GPS point, you can come to the museum. We have permits with the federal government to go out and do collecting. And then everything we collect, of course, comes here to the museum where it's available for exhibit, for public's interest with education, for scientific research. And the reason for this is vertebrate animals are rare as fossils. We happen to be very lucky. We live in an area that has a lot of them, but that's the exception. It's not the rule. So we want to make sure that things that are rare get treated, get properly collected, get all their information collected, are made available for study, and are taken care of. So all these bones behind me, the museum does not own those. Those are still owned by the United States government. We just take care of them for them. So we make sure that they're climate controlled, they're humidity controlled, that they have, proper, foam underneath them so they don't break. We prepare them, we remove excess rock, we put them on display for public exhibit. We use them in education like this. And taking them to schools. So we do a lot of the work that the federal government doesn't have the resources to do. So we work in partnership with them. And so that's why it's always important to know whose land you're on. If it's your land, if it's your backyard, then it's United States, baby. You own that down to the core of the earth. Not true in other countries. So say you live in Canada and you find a trilobite in your backyard. Well, Canada, the rules are different because it's Canada. And in Canada, all fossils belong to the province. So they would go to the provincial museum. Every single fossil is protected. South Africa is also the same way. China, it's a capital punishment to sell fossils. So always know the rules of where you are and what you're doing. We don't want anybody to get in trouble, but we do want everybody to, have the fun, have the experience of exploring and observing their natural environment and learning about it. So that's a great question. All right, so we have a little bit of time if anybody wants more questions. I see Joe is, you're welcome, Joe. So we have a couple of other talks this week if you guys are still thirsty for more. Tomorrow, Thursday, is Geoscience for Everyone Day during Earth Science Week. And one of my students, Tabitha McFarland, is going to talk about her accidental path into paleontology. I'll fully admit that I tempted her with fossils and she bit big time. Now she's getting ready to go to graduate school for paleontology. On Saturday, we're going to have a talk by Zeb Miracle on some of the rock art and archaeological discoveries in the area because it's International Archaeology Day. And then on Friday, the existing hike is full, but if there's enough interest, we will add an additional hike. It's Geologic Map Day. And geologist Eric Eckbert with the BLM is going to be leading a hike using a geologic map and a compass. So if there's anybody who wasn't able to get in on that hike and you would like to get in on that hike, send us an email and we'll see what we can do. All right, I'm going to wait a couple minutes just in case there are any other questions. And then we'll close her out for the night. Thank you guys for coming and playing with us in the wonderful world of Dinosaur Journey collections. It's pretty typical that any museum typically only has about 10% of their collections on display at any given time. So we do try to rotate exhibits at the museum so people can see different things. But as you can see, it's going to take us a while before we rotate through everything. So we like to do these behind the scenes for you guys. So Jacqueline and Luca, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you here, and we'll be more than happy to do this again for you guys. All right, well, we're going to close it out. Everybody have a great night, and enjoy more Earth Science Week.